I've been a touring comic for 15 years. So you know about the Montreal Comedy Festival? It's the largest comedy festival in the world. It took until 2019 to get me in there. And I was there with my agent and I was like, so why did this take so long to get me in here? And she said their response was, we just don't know where he would fit into this festival. The only way I got you in this time was because I told them Dave Chappelle and Ron White have you open for them all the time. Like that, made my blood boil. So I'm like, all right, I'll show you where I fucking fit in. I go out and murder my 7 minutes. I get a standing ovation and I come off stage and a big time bigwig of the festival comes up to me, pats me on the head and says, "You're so courageous." And I all but punched him in the face. I was so livid.
Hi, I'm Chris Waddell. Welcome to Living It, the podcast where we join experts in the experience of being human. Be bold. Say yes to adventure. Say yes to living it. All right, welcome to Chris Waddell Living It. This is where we talk to experts in the experience of being human. Today, we have Josh Blue, who is most assuredly an expert in a variety of different things. He and I were just talking about before we came on that we were both on the 2004 Paralympic team to Athens, which he said that we had a 3-hour. We'll talk about this. Our trip home was adventuresome, to say the least. He won in 2006, was the last comic standing, has millions of views on YouTube, which is pretty amazing. Go check him out. He is absolutely hysterically funny. Travels around doing comedy throughout the world, has spent time, 8 hours, I believe, in an animal, locked in an animal cage next to a gorilla. So we'll have to get to that one because that sounds kind of interesting to me. I don't think I've talked to anybody who has had quite that same experience. Josh, thanks so much for joining us and welcome.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, this is really great. I've got to figure out, first of all, has comedy always been your thing? Like from the time you were a little kid?
Yeah, I've always just been a funny person. Obviously, when you're a kid, you don't know that you can make a career out of that. I saw comedians, but I didn't equate that to me as a kid. But then when I got to college, I just found stand-up in college and gave it a whirl. And pretty much been doing stand-up my whole adult life.
I've done stand-up, I think, or not stand-up. I've done open mic night like 5 times. And it was one of the most nerve-wracking things that I've ever done. I mean, I remember the last time that I did it, I showed up at the place and there was a whole big line and some guy looked at my part of the line and was like, you guys aren't even going to get in. And it seemed like everybody knew each other and I was on the outside and I'm like, and then you get your 3 minutes, right? So your 3 minutes, that light comes on and you're waiting for the other light that says, hey, you're done. It was one of the most nerve-wracking things I've experienced. Was that the experience that you had, or was it a different experience for you?
My first time in a comedy club was definitely that experience of nerve-wracking. Felt like everybody knew each other already, and I'm the young guy with palsy. Nobody really gave me. Let's just say I could tell they didn't have much hope for me. I remember the first time, so I was doing stand-up in college, at the community center, and that was fine because it wasn't a comedy club setting. It was more like poetry and music, and then I just went up there and told stories. But my first time at a club was definitely walk in and basically the host was also a police officer, and he didn't really talk to me at all before the show. Nobody really addressed me, and then 2 minutes before he goes on, he comes up and goes, "Hey, what's your intro?" And then he went on and did 10 minutes of police jokes about hitting people with batons and shit. And uh, then he's like, okay, now it's time for our first comic. He's a very special friend of mine. And I went up there and was like, I don't know that motherfucker. That was my first thing I said on a big stage, and it got a huge laugh, and never looked back. Let's just say that much.
Well, there's nothing more intoxicating than when people laugh, right? I mean, it's one of those like, were you just hooked completely?
Yeah, man, you're right. There is nothing like that, and I love I love when you can get a room full of complete strangers to laugh at the same thing. So there'd be an old woman laughing at the same thing a young black man's laughing at. To me, that is like the best way of building a connection with people is just showing them, we're basically we're all laughing at my dumbass.
Did you start with the palsy kind of thing with, I mean, the act that you have now? I mean, obviously you've refined it, but was that part of it in the beginning? Like you're just going to make fun of yourself?
I didn't even really address it. I just talked about being a camp counselor and living in Africa and stuff that I knew about. I didn't even really want to talk about it. And then what I found is the more I was genuine and authentic voice talking about myself, the more it hit home with the audience. And mind you, nobody in the audience would ever have palsy, but they could relate to their own disability or in whatever fashion that is.
Is that a hard thing to do? I mean, because I think in some ways we see like our comic heroes, right? We look at the comic heroes and we're like, oh, okay. We do mimesis. We try to imitate our heroes, but to find our unique voice and to have that vulnerability, that seems like a bit more of a challenge. Was that hard for you to develop those jokes and figure out what was going to work and what you wanted to tell?
So basically, it took me a little bit of time to really fully embrace talking shit about myself, but I'm a master of it. I'm very happy to throw myself under the short bus for your entertainment. You know, and the truth is, I can be very harsh on myself on stage, but to me, it's tongue in cheek because most of the shit I say I can't do, I probably could do better than most people, or you know, what I mean. So I'm comfortable in making fun of myself. Basically, I take your preconceived idea of disability and feed it back to you in a way that makes me laugh.
Is that part of the reason why you do what you do, to take that preconceived idea of disability and turn it back on people? Is that part of the motivation?
I mean, it has become that over the years. When I first started, I just wanted to be a comic. I didn't want to be a spokesperson for disability, or I just wanted to be the best comic I could be. And it just it probably took a good almost decade for me to embrace it and go, you know what? It is okay to be a spokesperson for disability, and it is okay to talk about it. And it is, if people want to take um, inspiration from you, that's not your fucking problem.
So at one point you talk about, in one of your bits, you talk about your bracelet, your copper bracelet.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, everybody asked me, is this, there you go, you got it on. Is this one of those healing bracelets? And something that you said totally stuck with me was, if it gets me better, I'm gonna lose my gig. Like, and you get a laugh, but that to me seems like it's a little bit more than just a punchline. I mean, it's kind of, in some ways, it's kind of the basis, isn't it, of your comedy, of your profession?
Yeah. I mean, I have such a dilemma with this issue or topic or whatever, because a lot of people say I'm a very good stand-up comic that happens to have cerebral palsy. Then the other side was like, I'm the palsy comic who that's what you talk about. But if you ever watch my show, you know that what I'm saying is about palsy because it's coming from the perspective of a guy that has cerebral palsy. I'd much rather talk about, being a Southern Belle or something, but this is just happens to be the body that I was put in, you know. So it's it's always been kind of a conundrum for me to pick apart, like, would I still be as good as I am if I didn't have palsy? Excuse me, sir. All right.
The hecklers on stage are easy, man.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's the easiest part of my day is doing stand up.
But it's funny. I mean, like we get like the Bryan Cranston character on Seinfeld, right? Who's like, oh, I became Jewish for the jokes, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of
No,
like,
it offends me as a comedian. Yeah.
and I think that there's a part of that. Like we have to do the story and figure out what our story is, what's our, because I think part of what you're talking about is that we have to, like, the struggling part is the part that's funny, right? And the struggling part in our lives, but then to assume that you're just the palsy comic doesn't give you any credit because you've gone and perfected your craft too.
It's the opposite. In fact, it's very offensive and pretty hurtful. um, because, but here's the thing: is if you only see me as the palsy comic, you're not watching my show. You haven't seen it, or you haven't, because it's way deeper than just the palsy comic. And I have jokes that aren't about palsy, but it's still coming from the perspective of the dude with palsies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but how challenging in some ways is it, because this is in general, right? In creating your jokes, to make your jokes as universal as possible so that they're hitting, because you said that's the great part of the old lady, the young black guy, that are all laughing. Do you think about that when you're putting a joke together, or you're like, this is funny?
Yeah, I just know what's funny. I don't ever go, hey, what's the black guy and the white lady gonna laugh at? I just say, oh, this is funny. And because laughing is an involuntary thing, right? Something funny, you just laugh, that's what comes out. You could be at a funeral and laugh your ass off because something funny happened or something funny was said. And that's the beauty of what I do is like, maybe you don't want to laugh, but I'm gonna get it out of you.
No, that's the idea. And it is in some ways for you. I mean, I feel the same thing, right? I mean, it's like, am I the guy in the wheelchair, or am I me? And I was reading one article, I think it was from People Magazine, and it said he lives with cerebral palsy. And you're like, okay, does that mean he lives with, I mean, it's like, does he live with halitosis? Does he live with, I mean, it can be so many things, but it seems like such a limiting sometimes, exactly. But it seems like such a limiting uh, perspective. How do you find that that's a challenge to kind of break people's perspective to get them to see the real comic, or with the audiences, they get it?
I don't think I have trouble changing the perspective of audiences. If you're in my audience, you're gonna come along on the ride, and if you don't laugh at my show, something's wrong with you. Um, um, but where it comes in is in the industry. So um, I've been a touring comic for 15 years, selling out shows all over the world, for that long, and I have zero hype on me. Like the industry just sees me as the palsy comic. Or all right, so this is what the one that like it really changed my attitude on what I was trying to do in comedy. So you know about the Montreal Comedy Festival?
Mhm. Yeah.
It's the largest comedy festival in the world. And I won Last Comic in 2006, and I didn't get Montreal till 2019. Now, every single other comic on Last Comic Standing got to Montreal, got at least, over that span of time. It took until 2019 to get me in there. And I was there with my agent, and I was like, so why did this take so long to get me in here? And she said, their response was, we just don't know where he would fit into this festival. And I was like, ugh. So that like made my blood boil, because I've been crushing shows for a long time now, like crushing these shows. And basically she was like, the only way I got you in this time was because I told them Dave Chappelle and Ron White have you open for them all the time. Like they asked for this dude to open for them. And they're like, oh, okay. I was like, okay, so that, made my blood boil. So I'm like, all right, I'll show you where I fucking fit in. I'm gonna show you, right? So now I got this chip on my shoulder. I'm gonna show these people what they've been missing. And I did the William H. Macy Gala. So basically, it was in a big theater. He was hosting, and he introduces me. He's like, "This is one of my favorite comics of the night. Please welcome Josh Blue." I go out and murder my 7 minutes. Like, I get a standing ovation on 7 minutes. I was like, that's where I fucking fit in. And I come off stage, and a big time bigwig of the festival, old dude, comes up to me, pats me on the head, and says, "You're so courageous." And I all but like punched him in the face. I was so livid. Like, did you not just see what I did? Nobody else got a standing ovation. Nobody else did what I did. And my set crushed it. And that's all he saw. So from that point on, I was like, all right, well, this obviously, they're not going to see me as a viable comedian. They only see the arm, or they only see the gait. They don't see what I'm crushing, And to me, it's like, you never tell a fat comic that they talk too much about being fat, or a little person about being little, or a woman about being a woman. But for whatever reason, cerebral palsy, that nope, you just talk too much about that. I'm like, so that story to this day still, I mean, gets my blood boiling. And so basically, anytime I'm about to go on stage for a big show, I think about that. I go, he patted you on your fucking head, and I go and I murder it.
But you have the endorsement of Chappelle, of Ron White, of like the guys that, I mean, like your peers, but the people who really know.
Right.
But then at the same time, not the people who are booking you necessarily, right?
Right. I mean, I've opened for Chappelle over 50 times. I've been to his home. Ron White had me as his opening comic for a solid year, traveling the country on his tour bus and airplane. And he would be like, you better stop getting standing ovations in front of me, or you're not going to be working with me anymore. And needless to say, I'm not working for him anymore. So
Take that as the compliment that it is.
yeah, and I do, and that's the thing is like, I mean, I don't know, like you said, my peers, a ton of them have a lot of respect for what I do. I This is so weird because I'm not in LA or New York, so I never have done the scene there. So I kind of feel like I'm, uh, you know, I just don't know. It's almost like you described your first time at an open mic. I go to these clubs and there's all these big name comics that don't know who I am because I'm just not there every night hanging out. They know my name. But anyway, I went to Ralphie May's funeral, and um, at the funeral, three pretty big name comics came up and like kissed my hand and called me the king. I was like, what are you, what? Like, and it was like three people came in separately and did that. Like, oh, the legend is here. And they kissed my hand. I was like, what is happening? And I remember the comic that I was sitting with at the table. He goes, who the fuck are you? Like, who, why are they kissing your hand like that?
What was your answer?
I was like, I have no idea why they're doing that. I didn't. I mean, I mean, it's like Jay Moore did it, and like a couple other pretty big. Like, what is happening? Like, so, um, again, and it's like, if we put me on a show with all these big name comics, I mean, I've had a ton of like names be like, I don't want to follow you. Like, please don't make me follow Josh. And because I'm not, that's my thing. I'll never pull a punch. You put me on a stage, you better earn your following me, you know?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's so it's interesting. Do you think in some ways, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because you talk about this dichotomy too, right? In your act of like you're the guy on stage, but then getting there, you you know, you talk about being looking like a homeless guy or somebody
Right.
mistaken for a homeless guy, or you get thrown in the drunk tank, or those kinds of things. That to me is something that we all experience as well, right? I mean, it's like you're invisible until you're on stage, and then people can't get enough of it.
Yep.
How do you reconcile those two things? The idea of you being like this superstar to these people, and then the guys in Montreal going, yeah, we don't see where he fits. Like, how does that,
Right.
how do you reconcile that dichotomy?
Well, and then going on from that and going outside and having people like, hey, here's $1, you bum. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with it? Is like my girlfriend always wanted me to write something on that, like the duality of my life, because I mean, like you said, I'm a rock star on stage. I get standing ovations and sell out shows everywhere. But then I go on a date with her and they're like, is this your brother? It's so nice you're taking him out. Or, or whatever it is. Like, and it's like, it is such a weird mind fuck, I'll tell you. But it just plays into the comedy. And I'm very fortunate in the fact that I can take those instances and bring them on stage and make them funny and point them out and educate you or perpetuate it, either way.
Do you think it changes things? I mean, to be able to do that and point it and flip it on stage, do you think people go out going, that next guy that I see with palsy, I'm not going to ask him if he's homeless?
You know, I would hope so, but I would also almost think that it's on a level where you don't even, maybe you think about it, but it's just in your consciousness now, and the next person you see, even as you know, so many different disabilities, but you see you in a wheelchair and you're not like, hey, hi, how are you? Like, I was fine till you fucking came along. Like,
You're talking about being a touring comic. What exactly is a touring comic? Like, what does your year look like as a touring comic?
I mean, is this pre-COVID or?
Good point. Exactly. I mean, let's go back to pre-COVID, because COVID is a bit of a crazy time, right?
So pre-COVID, I was doing 200 shows a year on the road for like 15 years. So I am a road warrior. I do a lot of shows, and um, then that's being on a plane on average like every 4 days or something.
All over.
Yeah, I mean all over the world, but mainly the States. But and then COVID hit and kind of pulled the plug on that, which honestly was the best thing for me. Uh, I It just made me realize I didn't have to do 200 shows a year. Um, so now I'm a happier person because the road is boring as hell. I mean, maybe if you're with a band and you got some bandmates, but I'm a solo act, so a lot of hotels by yourself, and you got the whole day to wait around, which is weird because you think about like you have the whole day that you can't really do too much because you don't want to exhaust yourself for the two shows that night. So but now that COVID's, well, now that we're loosening restrictions, I've been back touring, but I don't think I'll ever go back to the way I was doing it before.
Why were you doing 200 shows? Is that because you need it to make the money to do it, to fill the void? Why were you doing 200 shows?
That's a good question, man. At first, after last comic, um, the mentality was like, what if this is just a flash in the pan thing? So, make the money while it was there, but then it just never went away and I just kept going. And then the other part of it was I really do embrace the fact that I'm changing people's perspective on disability, and I kind of feel obligated to do it. I don't mean obligated sounds rough. Like, I just feel like if I want to better the world, me doing what I do is a brilliant way of changing people's perspective. And it's not just through a lecture. You're laughing your ass off and you don't even realize you've changed your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I'm totally jealous of what you do. I mean, I do a lot of speaking. I mean, in front of a lot of groups and things like that. But I always wish that I could be funny. Like the times when I'm funny, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like this is the moment. So I'm totally jealous of that. Do you, like, post COVID, do you feel like you need that? Like you haven't had the connection to the audience, like you get cut off from your life source?
Yeah, well, and to add to the last part, I'm thoroughly addicted to stand up. It's not like you said. There's no better feeling than making people laugh. So yes, definitely, getting back on stage and getting that again feels amazing. Uh, and I honestly feel like the best comic I've ever been after that break, and just like kind of like I said, got some time to reflect, but then also I feel like I'm putting more into my shows because I'm not doing as many.
Yeah. So you're just hitting it hard when you're doing it. Do you have favorite audiences? Like, I mean, because you came up kind of playing like the college circuit, right?
Yeah, I did a bunch. I mean, comedy clubs are usually the best setting for stand-up. I mean, a big theater can be fun, but it can also be a lot of work. Because like if you figure a comedy club has 350 people, there's going to be one heckler, whereas in a theater you're going to have 9 hecklers. So, and honestly, I like heckling. Like, I dare you to heckle me. I will verbally tear you a new one. But when you're just babysitting drunk people, that's when it gets hard.
Because they just never stop and they don't even know that they've lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You can smash them over the head as many times as you want. They're just not gonna, I'm part of the show now. I'm helping. Okay.
Have you had that experience? Have you had the experience where somebody's waiting for you outside after the show and those kinds of things? Or
I mean, I've only had that one time in my career, and it was a lady that was like, I have a friend in a wheelchair, and I think it's very offensive what you were saying. I was like, well, maybe you should ask your friend in the wheelchair before you go defend them. I'm pretty sure they're on my side, you know.
yeah, and you're the one who looks ridiculous. It was yeah, I was doing a little bit of research and they were talking about I don't know what, you know, and it's one of those things, you're doing research, right? And I was looking at like Simon Cowling, I guess at one point had given this kid with Down syndrome a hard time about his weight, and everybody like came crashing down on him. And I guess the people from like Special Olympics or whatever were like, that's awesome. That's what you do to everybody. Like that's what you should do. Like treat them exactly the same. You rip everybody else. Why should it be different?
Right. No, I fully agree. And I mean, I think you knew that. And I mean, I learned that at the Paralympics is like, there's nobody harsher on disabled people than disabled people. I mean, I think a lot of times, if people could hear the, you know, palsy locker room talk, they would be so offended that, you know, most able-bodieds are not ready to hear this shit, you know.
Which is true of any locker room though, too, right? I mean, it's like the most offensive things that you're going to hear. So how were you as a soccer player?
You know, man, you know, I love the game. I scored a lot of goals in practice.
That's good.
You know, the games, you know, I probably have 20 caps and maybe 13 goals over my career.
Well, that's all right though.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, the captain of our team had like 98 goals though, but yeah. But he had a much longer career than I did. And he's much better. But you know,
Those two things aside, yeah.
I think for the level of disability of palsy that I have, I'm a pretty damn good soccer player.
Well, that's how you got into that was the email that got you onto the team, right?
Yeah, it was one of those things where because I didn't even know about Paralympics till after college. So, which I think is a bummer, because I think if I had got in the program earlier, I would have a ton more goals, you know, and a lot more caps, and you know, but you know, I only knew about Special Olympics, and I knew that wasn't for me.
Exactly. So when you're on the tour, you ever get a chance to play soccer? Does it ever come up?
Oh, sure, yeah, definitely. Lots of people offer me to come kick around with their team, or yeah, I got friends all over that play, so I'll usually have a pair of cleats in the bag. I always travel with a ball, and I have one buddy that is in Columbus, and he actually just keeps my shoes there. So when I'm there, he brings me my soccer shoes.
So you get a chance to do it. That's got to be kind of a fun thing, I'd imagine, for people who have seen you on stage to then be able to play soccer with you. Have you had any of those experiences that you look back on and go, that was a fun one?
Oh yeah, man. There was a goalie for like Manchester United or something in one of my audiences, and he's like, "You want to take shots on me in the parking lot?" I was like, "Yeah, I do." And this dude was unbelievably good. I was kicking it as hard as I could, and he would just like rainbow dive across the park. I don't. He must have been on crack or something because he was like diving on asphalt to save my goal. But that was to me one of those moments where like, dude, this dude is insane. He's so good.
But what a cool story too, that this guy was in your audience and you're out there in the parking lot, like kicking, kicking, trying to score on him.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I assume that was in the UK.
No, that was in Atlanta.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Wow. So where do you, I mean, the career arc for you was pretty compressed in some ways. I mean, by Last Comic, right? Where you sort of started and had like 6 years leading up to Last Comic and then kind of blew up, right? Where does it go, or where do you want it to go from here?
Well, I mean, yes, that's something big to address. Is like, I hit a very high pinnacle with Last Comic right out of the gate. I mean, that's a big thing to win as a 26-year-old. And I'm very fortunate in the fact that I was aware of that. I go, well, what's after this? What do you do to beat this? And honestly, I just I've always wanted to do movies and TV, but some of that's come my way. But again, that's also this industry that we're in only sees the disability. I mean, I've had somebody reach out to me one time, was like, uh, we need, they needed a disabled role played. And they're like, we need Josh Blue or something like that. And the guy had some weird brittle bone disease. And I was like, well, does he also have cerebral palsy?
That's nothing like this. Yeah.
Because I can't undo the palsy and pretend it's brittle bone disease.
Is that the hard part, like breaking into television, breaking into movies, and not being typecast? And would you have to write your own in some way to be able to
I
do it?
mean, there's some things in the works where people are writing me into scripts, and honestly, I've been in some movies and I've been in some TV stuff, but um, you know, it's just me. I'm the kind of character that you should write a script around. Don't try to make me fit into the script. I mean, and I guess that takes away from calling it acting, but the more I can be myself and be funny and be natural as this character that's engaging, then the better your movie will be.
But that's always the hope as a comic, isn't it? Like you get your sitcom or you get your movie and you get kind of that guaranteed payday and exposure, right? Because it's one, you get paid, but then two, you get that exposure that then helps you get all the other gigs, right? Is that how it works?
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, I obviously like getting paid, but that's really not my motivation in TV and stuff. I mean, it'd be great to get paid, but I just think like there's another like disconnect. Like when I won Last Comic Standing, I must have won that by millions and millions of votes, right?
Yeah.
And NBC didn't take that momentum that I had and like at least have me as the neighbor or something in a sitcom. They could have parlayed what I was doing into bringing those followers with me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's still in a lot of ways the uphill battle to be able to demonstrate that to them. Are you particularly good at the competition side of being a comic? Do you like that part?
I do. Um, I've always been every competition I've ever been in, I think the lowest I got was second place. So
Why is that?
why is what? That I got second
Why?
and didn't win?
No. Why do you
I'm
do
just
so? Yeah,
kidding. I'm just
yeah.
kidding.
Why were you
I'm just kidding.
second?
The, uh, they cheated. No, just kidding. Um,
No, but why do you do so well in the competition side, do you think?
you know what? It's weird because I don't know that it's like the fact that it's a competition, or I'm just a really good stand-up comic and I give it my all every performance. So I just happen to be the best one that's there, So
Yeah.
I don't even look at it like, I mean, it's weird, making comedy a competition is kind of a weird thing to do because it's a subjective thing, but by that rationale, I want to be the best comic in the room at all times. And you're going to have to fight me for the title, basically. Uh, like I said, I mean, when I was starting comedy here in Denver, I would open for these big name people and just fucking bury them. Like, and no regrets. Like, that's your bad, dude. Your name's on the bill. You should be able to follow this dude. And like, I mean, I've had comics be like, he can't open for me anymore. Like, I don't want him on my show. And I was like, I take that as a compliment. Like, okay, well, we see I'm better. And that was when I was coming up, that was when I was opening. Yeah. And to me, it's like I strive at being the best in the room. And most nights I can say that I am. And it took me a long time to have the confidence to say that. Like, I think you know that too. Like, there's a difference between being cocky about what you do and being like aware of what you're doing and like going, yeah, you actually are really good at this. And it's okay to say that. Because I remember when I first said, all right, dude, you're good at this. Then I got even better because I gave myself permission to be better.
What does perfecting your comedy look like? How do you approach that?
That's the beautiful thing about stand-up is you will never perfect it.
Sure.
You'll never learn it all. Every time you think you understand something, it changes or it morphs or something new comes along. So to me, it's just about maintaining the level of my own standards. Like, I don't want to tell a shitty joke. I'm going to give you the best joke that I can make. And I'm going to give you an hour of that. Like, I have 5 hour specials out. That's pretty prolific. I'm 42, that's pretty prolific um, amount of material to write. Uh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so just if I understand it correctly, so every time you do a special, it's kind of like those jokes are done, right? Like, so like you do an hour-long special, then you've got to come up with entirely new material.
You don't want any crossover.
How do you how do you come up with new material?
Well, that was like what I said, is something will happen or something will um, be in my head. I've had things in my head since I was a little kid sometimes, and it'll surface and be like, there's something there, but not yet. And then one day I'll just like say it on stage, and then the right thing to say after it will follow it. Like, I didn't prepare that. I don't know.
Really? So it happens organically for you.
Very organic, very like I do my best writing on stage. is basically. So the new one that I can use as an example is, being disabled. People often want to help me, right? Which is, I'm a pretty independent guy, but every once in a while, I'll take your help with like liquids. Hot liquids are my enemy. So, and then the person will go to help me, and they'll spill the thing, and I'm like, well, I could have fucking done that, and now you took my independence too. So, I could have fucking done that thing before I went on stage, but I didn't have the, and you took my independence as well. That was the organic thing that just came out on the stage, and that was the part that got the huge laugh.
When you get off of stage, I mean, obviously it sounds like you remember this, but when you get off of the stage, or do you record everything? I don't know. But are you trying to remember? You're like, okay, how did I say that? What did I do? Or was it just you were in the moment then, and you're gonna have to be in the moment the next time?
That just
Really?
hope it comes out again. So basically, I just say it 2 nights in a row, and basically I look at my my set as like it's constantly in flux, right? So I'm working the old jokes out and the new jokes in, and nothing is set in stone. Like every joke is malleable every night. So I just try to remember what really works and stick with that. But then the elements, I'll constantly try to switch it up or fit something new in, or even the order of my show. Like, oh, let me do this joke later in the show and see if that has a bigger impact later. Or so it's like a giant chess game that I'm playing by myself in my own head.
That sounds incredibly gutsy.
But I also put very little forethought into anything. So it's just weird. Like I always say this, if I ever put some effort into this, I could be really good.
Is there a conflict though, where it's like if you put more effort into it, you could be really good, or if you put more effort into it, you could take away what makes you good now?
I mean, yeah, I think I'm really good without putting the work in. So I put the work in.
You'd be much better. What's the role of the comedian? I mean, beyond like, I mean, obviously it's to make people laugh, but what do you see as the role being a comedian?
I really feel it's the last place of truth. Um, you go on stage and you say something that's painfully truthful. Like I always use Chris Rock as a example of just like saying these things that are so true that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe, oh yeah, he's right. Okay, yeah, he's right. Where it's I just feel like it's the last place you can say stuff and not get ridiculed. And comics do get ridiculed, but to me, I've just found a way to walk the line where I say just enough to make you really think hard, but not offensive enough for you to be like, oh, you know.
Is that a conscious walking the line, or is it something that you just kind of are aware of?
Just aware of, I don't know where the line is. The line is different every joke. The line moves, the line changes. But I know when I've gone over it.
How do you know when you've gone over it?
They just don't. The whole audience doesn't laugh. Pockets of people will laugh and like, oh, all right, I offended some people. But to me, I just have so much more material that if I ever say something that you don't like, the next one's coming right behind it that's gonna bring you back on my side, you know.
But it's still, I'd imagine that it is that some of your efforts are based on like bumping up against that line, right? I mean, is that when you're on your best, when you're trying to figure out how to best bump up against that line and push it and make people a little uncomfortable and make them think at the same time?
Yeah, but again, it's not like a conscious thought. It's just a thing that I feel the pulse of the room, or because, like I said, I write most of my stuff on stage, and I'm feeling what you're giving back, you know. So I feed off of, oh, they like that. That worked. Let's try this, you know.
Are those ones that scare you when you think, let's try this? Oh no, I don't know if I can try this one.
Yeah, I definitely have a joke that took me a long time to like say it repeatedly every night. I was like, uh-oh, they're not gonna like this one. But here it goes.
Now, is this one that I would have heard of in watching your stuff?
Uh no, it's very new. I don't know if you're ready for it.
You don't know if I'm ready for it. You're checking out the audience here, seeing it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can handle it. I just don't know if your audience is ready for it. On a nice talk show, you know.
Yeah, well, I don't know. We're trying to be nice here, but also trying to ask some questions that hopefully are thought provoking as well. Do you feel like you that like sometimes that you get a more sympathetic crowd, that you're allowed to push the limits a little bit more than possibly some other people are?
I don't know. I don't think so, because I think sympathy only goes so far, right? I mean, you can be sympathetic, but you get punched in the face 2 times, you're like, oh, I don't feel so sympathetic for that guy anymore. Yeah. So I feel like, again, it's like the idea of me being good in competitions. I'm just good at being a stand-up. So I don't know that I'm getting your sympathy. I'm just saying the right thing to make you laugh, right?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that's one of the challenges sometimes, is that the competition actually helps demonstrate who you are to the people who are unwilling to see it in some ways, if that makes sense.
It's weird too, you know, having these conversations. This is not anything that I ever think of on my own. I'm not sitting here like, where's the line, or, what's the sympathy level? You know, none of that is even on my radar. I just go do what I do.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that makes sense. I mean, I guess that is what you have to do. It's one of those that's kind of interesting, just sort of looking at it from the outside and going, okay, is he aware that he can get away with more stuff, or is he not, or how does that work? And
I mean, I'm definitely aware of that sort of thing, of what I can get away with more, or, but I think that's also just a product of being aware of that my whole life. So it's just ingrained into the comedy, you know?
well, you've been willing to do it. I did open with the idea of being in the cage, 8 hours in the cage next to the gorilla. How how did this work? Why did this work? I guess you got to give us a little bit of backstory probably on that too.
Sure. So my sophomore year of college, I went to Senegal, West Africa, and I did an internship in a zoo in the capital city of Dakar. And I was there for 3 months, um, doing a black and white photography, um, a bunch of amazing pictures. And then I also just pretty much learned how to be a zookeeper. And over the process, I became one of 3 people in the world that could pet this silverback gorilla. It's a big 400-pound bastard, and just an amazing dude. And somewhere along the way, I got the idea that I wanted to put myself on display as an exhibit. And I picked the day, and my zookeeper buddies locked me in this cage. And
You weren't in the cage with him, though, were you? Or were the
I shared a wall of bars with him.
okay?
So basically, it was his other half of his cage. And, there's a metal door in between the two cages, and you slide it over, clean it up, and then put the food in. And, so he gets half a cage each day while I was on the other half. And I don't know what I was thinking doing it, but no shirt, no shoes, just shorts, long hair. And, I think a lot of people hadn't seen a disabled white person in Senegal before. So if you take the palsy out of context and you put it in a cage, and then the zookeepers are also perpetuating this, they're calling me the boo boo monkey, and they're explaining to the people that they had just caught me in the mountains of the Congo. And I didn't speak the whole time. I just had been studying primate behavior the whole time I was there. So just doing a lot of monkey shit, just hopping around the cage. And the zoo had never been busier than the day that I was there. And it was before cell phones, so people must have been like leaving the zoo and be like, "Hey, you gotta go to the zoo today. You gotta see the boo boo monkey." And people were bringing bananas and peanuts and throwing them to me, and it was like the best I ate the whole stay there. People just brought me fruit, and the gorilla was very jealous that I was getting all the goodies.
I bet. I bet you could be in big trouble. He must have been mad at you.
Yeah, he was throwing shit at me, and but I would like take a bite of the banana, and I'd go over to the bars and give him a bite, and then I'd bite it again, and people like, "What the fuck is he doing?" But yeah, we were drinking out of the same water bottle and shit. People, but I mean, that day to me really, really changed my life. To be honest with you, it was such. I look at that moment in my life as the pivot point of like, I was still in college and I had some confidence, but I didn't. I still had a lot of worries about the palsy, and you know, uh, being disabled. I have a lot of angst, but to me, putting myself on display in such a manner, like, look at me. You want to see this body? Here it is, broken as you want it to be. And to me, it just really made me not afraid anymore of what other people thought of me. I guess, if I don't know how to say it exactly, but it just kind of broke the stigma in my head. Like, all right. And it's kind of cheesy, but I've been saying like a day in the cage equals a life on stage. So after that day in the cage, stand up is easy.
I bet. I bet. Does it? I mean, that's such a transformational moment, that day in the cage. Does it? And I mean, the profound way that you learn, right? I mean, you just learn things in absolute terms after that kind of a moment or that kind of an experience. Do you find that it creeps back? Does that fear creep back, and do you have to think back on that time and go, hey, that's the person that I want to be, like stripped naked? I mean, you weren't naked, but figuratively speak.
Yeah. Man, I think at each step of the way, there's a new level of stripping away, or, like, or that Montreal festival thing. That was another pivot point in my head where I was like, okay, this is how they see me. I did my best show. the best show of the night, and this is how they still see me. So I'm not going to change their perspective of me. So, yeah, I think there are steps along the way that get you to the new revelations and uh, changes in your own mind. Again, those, if I had to think about, those are the two moments in my life where I really did a full turn in life and go, all right, now I can do like the gorilla thing. I came out of that cage. I go, I could die right now and know for a fact that nobody's ever done what I just did.
Right.
I've broke ground in the world in a way that changed people. Because somebody else pointed this out to me. Like, can you imagine all the people that were at the zoo to this day are still going, remember that time we were at the zoo and we saw that guy, like whatever, the boo-boo monkey, what was that? Like,
Yeah, they're gonna forget parts of, they're like, do you remember when we saw the tiger? You're like, oh, I think so. I think I remember that. Do you remember when we saw the boo-boo monkey? Uh-huh. Yep,
yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
Nobody's forgetting
I
that one.
still have nightmares. Yep.
Do you bring part of that on stage with you? Like that because that's full commitment.
I mean, I've definitely told it on stage, but I haven't really done it in my stand-up stuff.
So you, I mean, it was this transformational moment, right? This transformational moment when you're at the zoo, and you completely went for it. I mean, went for it, 400-pound gorilla, being in the cage for 8 hours, like totally stripping yourself bare, saying, hey, this is it. Is that what you do when you're on stage, or is that what you're striving for, that same kind of commitment when you're on stage, the vulnerability, the honesty?
I think so, but the fact of the matter is when you do 200 shows a year, it kind of dulls that mentality. It's just another show. Yes, I'm putting my all into it when I'm there, but it's not like as profound because I got to do another one in an hour, if that makes, but also like by that rationale, the audience doesn't know any of that. They just saw a killer show. But to me, it's like, oh yeah, this is what I do for a living. So I'm going to do it again.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the hard part, isn't it? Doing 200 shows a year, having to pace yourself kind of emotionally through that.
Right. And I mean, people don't think it's that, oh, you work 2 hours a day. I'm like, I like to see you do what I do in those 2 hours. It takes a lot of mental energy to talk by yourself for an hour and lead the whole thing.
What's it feel like to come off stage for you?
Yeah, a lot of energy, a lot of, just like with the palsy, it's very expressive. So if there's adrenaline in my body, it shows in my movements. Or
Like spasm kind of thing, or?
yeah, I mean, not so bad, but it's more like, well, I mean, you've done stand-up or you've done speaking, you come off, you're like, that was awesome, that was that felt good, that one felt good, or the other side, that one felt bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of it for me when I'm on stage, and when I first started, it was almost like I couldn't take questions afterwards. I would do a speech and people ask questions, and I was like, look, I just gave you everything that I have. I'm like an empty vessel. So I get the buildup, and then pretty soon thereafter I get the crash. But some people go in the opposite direction, right?
Yeah, I mean, I found I gotta drink like 40 beers to come down.
Really?
No, not quite that many, but
I figured you were giving us a little exaggeration for the sake of the story, but
yeah, probably like 32. more accurate.
Have your soccer playing buddies ever been in the audience?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I got guys that still come out to shows here and there, but when we were at Chula Vista at the Olympic Training Center down there,
Mhm.
I would do a show in San Diego or La Jolla. They have the La Jolla Comedy Store down there, so I would do a night. The coach would let us go, and a lot of different sports would show up. So it'd be track and field and every archers, and I would just fill the comedy club with Olympic level athletes.
That is awesome. So was this before or after Last Comic?
Both.
Both, really?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you were good enough beforehand and well known enough that you could kind of say to these guys, "Hey, I'm going to be down there. Can you book me for a night?"
Yeah, or else I would just get on a showcase night beforehand, where it'd be like, oh, there's 6 comics each doing 20 minutes. So before Last Comic, it was more like that, and then after that, I could have my own night.
And your own night is that an hour? Is that the way it works if you have your own night?
Generally, a comedy show is 90 minutes, so they'll usually have 3 comics on the show like that. So
Mhm.
a host, a feature, and then the headliner.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, this is absolutely awesome, man. I really appreciate you. I mean, it's just one of those things that I think comedy is one of those things that we all sit there and we just absolutely love, like what you guys are doing. But to understand some of how it works behind the scenes is really cool, because it doesn't make sense to us. It makes sense like, hey, that's funny, I'm gonna laugh. And that's as simple as it is for the audience.
Oh, it's fun, man. I love doing it. I thoroughly do love doing it. So
What are the best places for people to find you, and where can they find you sometime soon if they want to see you?
yeah, so the easiest thing right now is probably just Amazon Prime. If you have Prime, you can watch my shows for free. But joshblue.com, I'm back touring again, so I'm all over the country. And then I'm on all the socials, just Josh Blue Comedy, and Instagram and all that shit. So, and there might be a TV thing, but I'm not allowed to be talking about it right now. But keep an eye out for some TV stuff.
Okay, we'll keep an eye out. We don't want to push you too hard on that one. I mean, I'd love to have the scoop and everything, but
Well, I'd love to share it, but
I'm sure you would.
check. Just keep an eye on NBC.
All right. Well, cool. On NBC, actually. Okay. Sounds good. Well, we will definitely do that. Yeah, we should get you on. They should get you on the Paralympic coverage back, like what they did in London in 2012.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
That would be fun.
I did a show in Athens. Were you not there?
I don't think I was. I mean, it was. Where did you do the show?
In one of the dorms, like the basement. It was just for the U.S. delegation.
I don't know if I was there. I don't think I was. I totally missed out.
Yeah, it was I just did a show for all the U.S. athletes.
Well, we'll have to get more of that. And Josh, thanks for making time for us. Really appreciate you taking your time, and look forward to seeing you in the future in person, now that we're able to drop our masks. And yeah, thanks for making it happen, man.
Definitely, my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.
All right. For all of you, thanks for joining us. Please continue to follow us. If you like what you've seen here, tell your friends, like us, subscribe. We're available on all of the platforms, on the podcast platforms, and you can watch Josh and me if you tune into YouTube as well. So tell your friends, and thanks a ton. We'll see you again on Chris Waddell Living It. Thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to Chris Waddell Living It for more stories on the adaptive community, the Paralympics, artists, athletes, entrepreneurs, experts in the experience of being human. Also follow us on Spotify, Apple, Facebook, and Instagram. I look forward to seeing you next week.